Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Thanks for letting us be part of your morning. Now again, Catholic Chicago.
Good morning and welcome to the Voice of Charity. I'm Phil Zepeda of Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Chicago, and I thank you for joining us this morning on WNDZ 750 AM in Chicago and on our live stream at on YouTube at Catholic Chicago. One of Catholic Charities' longest-running programs is the LOSS Program, which stands for Loving Outreach to Survivors of Suicide. Founded by Father Charles T. Rubey and still led by Father Rubey today, LOSS continues in its 44th year to offer a safe, non-judgmental environment where survivors of suicide can find community, direction, and resources whenever they are in the grieving process. Now, LOSS has gained national and international attention for the ways it has helped people reclaim joy and happiness again after suffering this devastating loss. And the LOSS team is planning a special in-person event for the entire LOSS community later this month, and we'll have an opportunity to talk about that a little. Here with us today, this morning, to provide us with an update on everything about the LOSS program are Deborah Major, who is the program director, and Emily Tegenkamp, the program coordinator for LOSS. Welcome, Debbie and Emily. We're so glad to have you guys with us. Hold on here. We're working through some technical difficulties. Hey, we're just going to kind of continue here, hopefully that you guys can hear me. Let's start with Debbie. Debbie, can you remind our audience about the goals of the LOSS program?
Yes. Can you hear me, Phil?
Yep, we're all good. Thank you. Thanks, Debbie.
Okay. Yes, the goals of LOSS are to provide a safe and non-judgmental environment for those who have lost loved ones to suicide to come together and grieve. And so suicide is still poorly understood. People often feel a sense of shame or blame. And so it's hard for people to talk about this. Suicide is still, unfortunately, highly stigmatized, and people really need a compassionate space that is judgment-free, where they can come and express their feelings, share doubts, and ask questions. Many, many people have questions about why their loved one did this, how the loved one could have done this. So that's our overriding goal.
So Debbie, what makes, I don't want to trivialize this at all, what makes suicide loss different from other deaths? And are there aspects of the grief process that are changed because of these differences?
Yes. So, suicide has some things in common with other traumatic deaths, but it's usually very sudden. It's unexpected. People were not expecting it to happen. And often the person who dies, who ends his or her life, has done this in a way that's violent. They've kind of done something violent to their bodies. And so that is also traumatizing to the family members and those who are left behind. So there's no opportunity to prepare psychologically for the loss. The person is there 1 minute and then gone the next in a very horrific way. And because the person did this to themselves, when you're in a relationship with a person, grievers often believe that if they had done something different, the person would still be alive. And so people are coming with these ideas about, well, if had I done something, had I changed my behavior or changed my routine or changed something about the way that I interacted with the person, they would still be here. So there's a lot of self-blame and a lot of shame, which is not something people experience if someone dies of a heart attack or if there's been a death due to cancer. You're not thinking, well, if I had changed my behavior or done something different, my child would still be alive, my husband, wife would still be alive. You're not thinking those thoughts.
Right.
So this extra burden of believing that in some way the griever was implicated in the death makes the grief process much more complicated. And that's why this program, the LOSS program, has been so valuable to people who've lost loved ones to suicide.
So Debbie, I one of the most important things for me that I see is the beauty of the accompaniment that loss provides, right? Talk about that a little. How does loss accompany survivors in their grief?
Yes, so this is really crucial. People really need to come together with others who are experiencing this kind of loss. Initially, people feel very isolated. Many people tell us they don't know anyone else that this has happened to. They feel ostracized and they feel stigmatized. And so we have many wonderful support group options for people. And the support groups are critical because then you walk into the room, and either the virtual room or the physical room, right, and you meet other people who are going through this, and you can see that these are people who are grieving too. You're welcomed by, we have veteran facilitators, by which I mean other survivors of suicide loss, right, who have used the program to help themselves heal, and they have quite a bit of experience at helping us to lead the groups. They're also joined by a licensed mental health professional. So all of our groups have this team of a veteran survivor together with a mental health professional. And together we kind of hold the group and provide that comforting, companioning environment.
Wonderful. Debbie, over the years, the LOSS program has evolved to recognize the challenges that people have in dealing with their grief, often based on their relationship to that loved one. Can you describe how the LOSS program is structured to help adults and children in the most effective ways?
Yes, so the program has evolved over the years, and it continues to evolve. So we have special groups for people who've lost a spouse, a relationship-specific group for people. We have a special group for parents who've lost a child to suicide. We have a young adult group, which was started by one of our therapists, Jessica Mead, when she discovered that young adults were not coming to our groups, and that the grief process for young people differs somewhat. So as we've come to understand the needs of unique populations, we've tried to adjust. There are a couple of us who also offer counseling, grief counseling to children. So we're paying special attention to developmental differences. Children do grieve differently, and children of different ages grieve differently. So a 5-year-old child who's lost a parent to suicide is going to have different needs than a teenager who's lost a parent or a good friend. So we're paying very close attention to developmental differences and also personality differences as well.
Debbie, one last question for you before we bring Emily into the program here too. Emily, we haven't forgotten about you. Debbie, some people contact Catholic Charities and the LOSS program right after the tragic loss has occurred, right? But we also recognize that others reach out months later, sometimes even years later, and that requires a different approach on your team. Can you talk about that a little and the different ways that you're approaching and working with families and survivors?
Yes, just briefly, because it's kind of complicated, but so we want to recognize that something prevented them from coming in the immediate aftermath of the loss, and we don't want them to feel ashamed about that in any way. Certainly. So recognizing that, we all have our defenses and we need our defenses. And at the point when the person finally decides to come, whatever defenses they have been using to sort of hold that grief at bay, those defenses have failed. So they're coming in kind of cracking and then ready to begin the work. So we want to understand both what's happened now that's caused the defenses to fail. We want to understand the defenses, and then we want to understand who they were at the time of the loss. If it was a young teenager and they kind of kept all those feelings in a box for 10 years. I have someone I'm actually meeting today, this afternoon, where that's the case. And so now this young person is going to be coming to begin the work, and so there'll be much to unpack. So we just do this very gently, paying very close attention to what the griever needs.
Debbie, thank you so much. Emily, a little bit building on that question, a significant part of the LOSS program is helping survivors celebrate the life of their loved one, right? And let's talk about that. What are some of the ways that you recommend that individuals, families, and friends do that and celebrate and recognize the life?
Well, and I love the way that you posed that question, Phil, about celebrating the life, because that's a big part of what we emphasize. I think that especially when, as Debbie was saying, when we talk about suicide loss, often that is what our suicide loss survivors are communicating to us, that they're worried that will be the memory of their loved one, is how they died and not how they lived. And so we always do encourage our families to celebrate the life of their loved one, to talk about the way that they lived. And so sometimes that is a simple conversation, encouraging family members to continue to talk about their loved one, to share memories, to just keep them a part of their day-to-day life, just to make sure that they're not forgotten, that they're just not never spoken of again. So some of that is just based in communication and how we sort of speak about our loved ones, and some of it's a little more formal. Some of it can revolve around ritual. Father Rubey talks about that a lot, about the power of ritual and how healing that can be, and how it can give folks sort of a structure for processing their grief. We especially talk about special days. So when we talk about holidays, or we talk about anniversaries of when someone died, we often encourage our lost members to have a plan, just to think through that ahead of time so that they're not caught off guard. And it can be something like lighting a candle. It can be something like having a service day for your family to go and volunteer to spread that spirit of generosity that their loved one had. And so there are many different ways that we recommend that individuals and families do that, but all in that spirit of how do we keep talking about the memory of our loved one? How do we keep them here with us? How do we continue that relationship even though physically they're no longer here with us?
So, Emily, before we throw it to break, we'll touch on this a little, and if we need to delve into it a little bit more after break, I'd love to. But there was an unintended consequence of the pandemic, right? We switched to complete online sessions for loss instead of meeting with survivors in person. You've actually seen this somewhat of a blessing in disguise. Talk a little bit about that before we go to commercial.
Yes, Phil, it certainly has increased our reach. That is a big part for us. It was a bit of a scramble, just like it was for everyone during those really intense times in 2020 to sort of get those services going. But we have found that it has really provided a resource for folks who maybe don't have something local. The LOSS program is really unique in that its mission is specifically to help those who have lost a loved one to suicide. And that doesn't exist everywhere. And so we found that when folks can find us from coast to coast, they do, and they want to join our online groups. Sometimes we have some difficulty with our time differences, so we're good about communicating that if someone's joining us from the East Coast or the West Coast. But we've had over 25 different states represented in our groups, and I've also had folks join us internationally when they're traveling or and just kind of need some support.
I find that so fascinating, and I want to delve into that a little bit more after we take this break. You're listening to The Voice of Charity on Catholic Chicago. We're talking with Emily Tegenkamp and Debbie Major. We'll be back with more of this conversation on the LOSS program at Catholic Charities right after this break.
Caring adults make all the difference in the lives of adolescents. Catholic Charities understands this, and our mentorship programs provide a free opportunity for young adults to spend time with volunteers who genuinely care about them. This program is ideal for youth aged 9 through 12 who may need support navigating the challenges of childhood and early adolescence. Our amazing volunteers serve as friends who help youth recognize their strengths and empower them to reach their full potential. Catholic Charities conducts a thorough background check on every volunteer, and our program coordinator closely monitors and supports every relationship. Mentoring is a fun after-school program that can help young adults build confidence and enjoy fun activities with their peers, too. To learn more, visit CatholicCharities.net or call 312-655-7970 in Cook County and 847-782-4224 in Lake County. We're connecting youth with great role models. Join us today.
This is year 44 for me teaching. When I started here, there were teachers here that had taught me when I was a student. Now I'm the old person. Right now, I teach junior high math. I love when kids find what I'm teaching to be fun and they get it. I see that light bulb go off and it's a thrill. People are always amazed. What? You're here for 44 years? It's hard for me to believe, frankly. I love what I do. Every summer I think, oh, I miss the classroom. Even on the weekends, I think I can't wait to get back on Monday and teach those quadratic equations.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs. Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program has assisted thousands of single parents who are working to become more self-sufficient through education and employment opportunities. Our experienced case managers accompany participants for up to 5 years on their journey to identify, address, and break down barriers to improving their quality of life and achieving meaningful goals for themselves and for their families. Professional, compassionate assistance is offered in a safe and trusting environment as participants develop the skills needed to become financially stable and able to support themselves. Every achievement starts with a decision to try. To learn more about Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program, call 847-782-4233 or visit CatholicCharities.net.
Welcome back to the Voice of Charity. I'm Phil Zepeda of Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Chicago. We are glad to have you with us this morning. We're continuing our conversation about the LOSS program at Catholic Charities with the program directors and program coordinator, Deborah Major and Emily Tegenkamp. Again, we're so glad to have you here, and I'm so fond of this program and the wonderful work that you do. Emily, back to you. Before the break, we were talking about this heavier transition to online. There might have been some counseling that had been happening via Zoom prior to this, but certainly with the wave of the pandemic and moving everything virtually, that had to take its toll. So I want to hear a little bit more color on that you have to share and the struggles and the joy that came out of that, as well as, I was interested to learn about the LOSS writing group as well, too. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the technology challenges and again, the wonderful nature that came out of that, and then the LOSS writing group.
Oh, sure. Zoom and moving things online certainly forced us, but also opened us up to being more creative with the different services that we offer. And the writing group is certainly a piece of that. So our writing group is a closed group, as we call it, which means that it's the same group of people who are meeting together. The majority of our support groups are open groups, and so we welcome folks to come at any time to join us. The writing group, just because people are writing about their personal experiences, maybe really writing things that are very, very private to them, talking about guilt or talking about blame, forgiveness, those really big topics. There's certainly a level of privacy in that group that we try to maintain, but it's been very healing for the members who have joined that. And I think in a similar way, one of the things that we began during our online sessions and during the pandemic was a community education program, our first Monday grief speaker series, which really tackled more of that psychoeducational piece for our grievers to really understand what that grief process maybe looks like for them, to answer some questions that they may have been confused about or sort of working through. And so having an online platform to do that and putting our presentations on YouTube really helped, I think, with that reach of reaching some folks in places where they may not have that same level of resources. And I heard a good portion of the portion before us when you were talking about Bill W. and 12-step programs and recovery. And I think in a similar way, loss has filled that need. The benefit of a 12-step program or recovery program is that you can join from anywhere. They're international. Yeah. They're everywhere you need to be. And loss, moving online allowed us to fill that role a little bit too, that people didn't have to be here in Chicago to join us, and they could still get the support from where they were.
Now, Emily, there's a big event coming up at the end of this month, the 32nd annual Blossoms of Hope brunch, coming up on Sunday, April 30th, out at, I believe, Drury Lane, Oak Brook. And tell us about this inspiring gathering of the entire lost community.
The Blossoms of Hope brunch is really a celebration, I think, of the work of the LOSS program, but also a gathering for our survivors to acknowledge, their process, their grief work, an opportunity for them to come together with other suicide loss survivors who maybe, for the past few years, they've only met online. We're hoping that there will be some really nice meet and greets this year at our first in-person event. In the past few years, we've had a virtual event in 2020, 2021, and 2022, but we're really excited to be back in person again this year. And gather. I'm just looking at some of these wonderful photos you're showing.
They're tremendous.
And you can just see the smiles on people's faces. There really is a healing quality to this event, of our survivors getting to come together. And as we mentioned before, it's really more of a celebration, right? It's sort of a way to sort of look around the room and say, wow, all of these people have also experienced something that I've experienced, something really, really heavy and really tragic. And yet look at us, we're able to come together. We're able to share a meal. We're able to, to fundraise so that we can continue this work for other people who are going to need this program in the future. And so the Blossoms of Hope brunch is a really, really special event for our survivors. And also just to keep the program going so that we can be here for others who need to give us a call.
I'm so excited that it's back in person. Truly, that's the beauty and the joy of this, and I'm excited to be there myself. I'm coming. That might be news to you.
Oh, wonderful!
But I'm excited to be there as well. Do you have to be a lost participant to attend, and how do people find out more information about this particular event?
Sure. So you certainly don't have to be a LOSS member to attend. If you're interested in our work and want to support our program, you're certainly welcome to join us. But the majority of the audience are LOSS members. They're individuals who have received support from our program, who then bring their friends and family to join them for this event and to support LOSS and the work that we do. And so it's certainly open to anyone who may have an interest. We also have have a wonderful speaker who will be joining us, who will be talking about her academic research about working with suicide loss survivors. There's also a wonderful meal to accompany that. So it's really a lovely event, and all of that information is available on our website. So at CatholicCharities.net, you can find the Blossoms of Hope brunch info on there, information on how to purchase tickets, or if you are interested in a sponsorship or an ad. There's all sorts of things and good information about the brunch on the Catholic Charities website.
Wonderful, wonderful. And kind of looming in the background of this conversation is everything about Father Rubey, right? You know, as we talk about how the LOSS program continues to help people nationwide today and invite more people to learn about the Blossoms of Hope brunch later this month, we want to call your attention to another event that's occurring today at Catholic Charities, our main offices on LaSalle Street, in honor of Father Rubey and his work with the LOSS program. Father Charles Rubey is celebrating 50 years of service to Catholic Charities and 57 years as a priest this year. We're having a noon mass that's going to be celebrated today at our 721 North LaSalle offices, as I mentioned, followed by a brief reception and Thanksgiving and in tribute to Father Rubey. He has legions of fans and admirers at Catholic Charities and around the nation, and we are so thrilled to have this opportunity to thank him for his dedication to LOSS and to the mission of Catholic Charities for the past 50 years. He's selflessly stayed with this very challenging ministry for more than 40 years. He has been there for families at some of the darkest moments of their lives, presiding over funerals, blessing homes where loved ones died, and counseling thousands of grieving families and friends. And Father Rubey is known for keeping his friendships, right, going strong with thousands of people in the LOSS community that he's met over the years. So, Debbie, let me throw it back to you. How has Father Rubey impacted your life and your work at Catholic Charities?
You know, I think it was a kind of a radical act in some ways, if that's not too strong a word, for Father to start a program like LOSS, to be telling people back in 1979 that suicide is an act of desperation born of psychological pain and not a sin. And we still have people today who come feeling very fearful that their loved one has died in a way that is sinful. And so this very, very different way of helping people to understand what suicide is it's really, I think, changed so many lives. And to think that he started, in 1979, welcoming people and helping to explain that suicide is not a sin it's been really I think, life-changing for many, many people.
Absolutely. And Debbie, before we close the program and we're out of time, I want to make note that if anyone listening to this program needs help and wants to contact the Catholic Charities LOSS program, please call 312-655-7283 or the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 988. You know what? We the phone number got caught off on my sheet here. Do you guys have that number handy? I'll give you a moment to capture that. What is that number?
312-655-7283. And we also have an email, loss@catholiccharities.net, LOSS@catholiccharities.net.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Again, Debbie and Emily, I'm so fond of this program and the work that you do. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, if you're interested in joining the 32nd Annual Blossoms of Hope Brunch on Sunday, April 30th at Drury Lane in Oak Brook, you can find more information at CatholicCharities.net under Enable Our Work and Attend an Event. But all the information is right there, and you'll be able to check it out. So we welcome you, all of you, back next week for another edition of The Voice of Charity. For now, this is Phil Zepeda with Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Chicago. I thank you for tuning in and believing in the mission of Catholic Charities.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.